My name is Khalid Al-Harbi. I am 42 years old, and for most of my life, I was a man people believed could never be shaken. I was born in Medina, where faith was not a choice, but an inheritance, passed from father to son like a family name you could never escape. My father was an Imam, and from the moment I could speak, he filled my mouth with verses before I even understood their meaning. I remember sitting on the cold floor as a child, repeating words over and over while fear sat heavy in my chest, afraid of disappointing him, afraid of disappointing God. Fear was the first emotion I ever associated with faith. It was not love, it was not peace, it was fear. As I grew older, people began to see me as someone chosen. They spoke to me with respect, with honor, with expectation. By the time I was 26, I had become an Imam myself, standing before rows of men who trusted me to guide them. They never saw the quiet moments when I was alone, when the mask fell away and I was just a man staring into the darkness, wondering why I felt so empty inside. I had memorized every verse I was taught to memorize. I had obeyed every rule I was taught to obey. I had lived the life I was told to live. Yet peace was something that always felt just beyond my reach, like water in the distance that disappeared when I moved toward it. Then I married Aisha, and for the first time, something in my life felt different. She was gentle, calm, and carried a quiet strength that I could not explain. When she smiled at me, there was no fear in her eyes, and sometimes I found myself wondering what it felt like to live without fear. That thought alone made me feel guilty. Men like me were not supposed to question. We were not supposed to doubt. We were not supposed to wonder if something was missing. But deep inside, in the silence I never spoke about, I knew there was an emptiness I could not fill with prayer, discipline, or obedience. If you are listening to my voice right now, I want you to understand something. I never planned to tell this story. Men like me are taught to protect their image at all costs. We are taught that weakness is shame and doubt is betrayal. But truth has a way of finding you when you least expect it. It waits patiently in the shadows of your life, watching, waiting for the moment when everything you believed begins to crack. And when that moment came for me, it did not come with warning. It did not come with mercy. It came quietly. Inside my own home, through the one person I trusted most, and it would destroy the man I thought I was forever. It began with something so small that any other man might have ignored it, but I could not. Aisha stopped praying behind me. For years, it had been our routine. When I stood in our living room and raised my hands, she would quietly step behind me, her voice soft as she followed my recitation. It was a comfort I never acknowledged, but I always expected. Then one night, she did not come. I finished the prayer alone, the silence behind me louder than any sound. When I turned, she was sitting on the edge of the bed, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her eyes lowered. "Why didn't you pray?" I asked. She hesitated, then whispered, "I was tired." It was such a simple answer, yet something inside me felt disturbed. Aisha was never too tired for prayer. In the days that followed, I noticed more changes. She spoke less. She watched me differently, as if she were carrying a secret too heavy to share. Sometimes I would catch her staring into nothing, her expression distant, peaceful in a way that made me uneasy. One night, I woke up and noticed the faint glow of light beside me. She was sitting up, holding her phone close to her chest. Her face was calm, focused. When she realized I was awake, she quickly turned the screen away. "What are you reading?" I asked. "Nothing," she said too quickly. The word lingered between us, heavy with meaning. After she fell asleep, curiosity and fear drove me to reach for her phone. My hands trembled as I unlocked it. I did not know what I expected to find, but it was not that. A Bible app was open on the screen, and the words glowed in the darkness, foreign and forbidden. My heart began to pound so hard I could hear it in my ears. For a moment, I could not breathe. It felt as if the ground beneath my life had shifted without warning. I stared at the words, unable to look away. This was not just a book. This was betrayal. This was danger. My mind filled with memories of my teachers warning us about people who abandoned Islam. They spoke of shame, punishment, and dishonor. I felt anger rising inside me, but beneath the anger was something worse. Fear. When she opened her eyes and saw me holding the phone, she did not panic. She only looked at me with quiet sadness. "Why?" I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. She swallowed slowly, then said, "Because I wanted to know the truth." Her words struck me like a physical blow. This is not truth," I said. "This is deception." She shook her head gently. "I have never felt peace like this before." Peace. That word echoed in my mind long after she spoke it. I had spent my entire life serving God, yet peace had always felt distant, unreachable. And now she was telling me she had found it somewhere I had been taught to fear. I did not understand it. I did not accept it. But for the first time in my life, doubt entered my home, and it refused to leave. The night everything shattered began with silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that feels heavy, like the air itself is waiting for something terrible to happen. I had spent the entire day pretending nothing had changed, leading prayers at the mosque, speaking about obedience and loyalty to Allah, while inside my chest a storm was building. Every word I recited felt sharp in my mouth. Every verse about judgment felt personal. When I returned home that evening, Aisha was sitting at the small table near the window. The sunset light touched her face softly, and for a brief moment she looked almost untouchable, as if she already belonged somewhere I could not follow. I did not greet her. I did not remove my shoes. I stood there and asked the question that had been burning inside me all day. "Are you still reading it?" She looked at me calmly. "Yes." The word struck me harder than if she had shouted. "You will delete it tonight," I said, trying to steady my voice. "You will repent, and this will end." She shook her head slowly. There was no rebellion in her expression, only resolve. "I cannot deny what I have come to believe," she said. Something inside me cracked. I stepped closer. "Do you understand what this means? For me? For our family?" She met my eyes in a way she never had before. "I understand what it means for my soul." Her words felt like betrayal wrapped in gentleness. I raised my voice. I reminded her of shame, of consequences, of what people would say. I reminded her of fear. But she did not respond with fear. She said quietly, "Khalid, I am not trying to dishonor you. I just want truth." Truth. That word again. It echoed in my mind like an accusation. My entire life had been built on certainty. If she was right, then everything I had preached, everything I had defended, could collapse. I felt cornered, not by her, but by the possibility that I had never truly known God. Anger rose to cover that fear. I paced the room, my thoughts racing. "You are being deceived," I said. "This is weakness." Tears filled her eyes, but her voice did not tremble. "No," she whispered. "This is the first time I feel loved without fear." Loved without fear. The phrase pierced deeper than anything else she had said. I felt as though she had reached into my chest and exposed something I had spent years hiding. I moved toward her, my hands shaking, my breathing uneven. I wanted to shake her certainty away. I wanted to silence the doubt rising inside me. But instead, I found myself standing frozen, staring at the woman I thought I knew. In her eyes, I saw peace. And in mine, I saw panic. The room felt smaller, suffocating. My authority, my identity, my control was slipping through my fingers. That night did not end in understanding. It ended in distance, in silence, in a fracture that neither of us could repair. And as I lay awake beside her, staring into the darkness, I realized something terrifying. I was not fighting her faith. I was fighting my own fear of losing everything I thought made me who I was. After that night, something inside me began to rot. I continued my duties as an imam, standing before men who trusted me to guide them, but my voice no longer felt like my own. The words came out of my mouth, yet they felt empty, like echoes in a hollow cave. I watched their faces as they listened, their eyes filled with certainty, and I wondered if they could see the truth I was hiding. I was no longer certain. I was afraid. At home, the silence between Aisha and me grew heavier each day. She no longer argued. She no longer tried to explain herself. She simply existed beside me, calm in a way that made me feel restless. Sometimes I would catch her whispering to herself, her lips moving softly, but it was not Arabic. It was not anything I recognized. One night, I asked her, "What are you saying?" She hesitated, then replied, "I am praying." The answer unsettled me more than I wanted to admit. "That is not prayer," I said. She looked at me gently and asked, "How do you know?" I had no answer. That question stayed with me long after she fell asleep. I began to notice things I had ignored before. The way fear had always been present in my faith. The way obedience had always been more important than peace. I told myself these thoughts were whispers of Shaitan, trying to weaken me. I increased my prayers. I recited longer, louder, desperate to silence the questions growing inside me. But the more I prayed, the louder the silence became. One night, I woke suddenly, my heart racing. The room was dark, but I felt something I could not explain. A presence. I sat up slowly, my breathing shallow. The air felt heavier, charged with something unseen. I looked toward the corner of the room, and for a moment, I thought I saw someone standing there. A figure, still and silent. My chest tightened. I blinked, and it was gone. I told myself it was a dream, a trick of the mind. Yet the feeling did not leave me. It stayed with me, watching, waiting. The next day, I could not focus. Even as I stood in the mosque, reciting familiar verses, my mind drifted back to that moment. I had spent my entire life believing I understood the spiritual world. I had believed I knew truth. But now, I was no longer sure. That night, I avoided sleep, afraid of what I might see. But exhaustion eventually claimed me. And in the darkness between waking and dreaming, I heard something. Not with my ears, but deep inside me. It was not a command. It was not a threat. It was simply a voice filled with sorrow. I could not understand the words, but I understood the feeling. It was not anger. It was grief. I woke up trembling, my body covered in sweat. Beside me, Aisha slept peacefully. I stared at the ceiling, my heart pounding. For the first time in my life, I felt something I had never allowed myself to feel before. Not fear of punishment, but fear of truth. I tried to resist it. I tried to bury the curiosity before it could grow into something dangerous. But curiosity has a way of surviving, even in the presence of fear. Especially in the presence of fear. It was late one night when I found myself sitting alone in the living room. Aisha had fallen asleep hours earlier. The house was silent, except for the faint hum of the air conditioner. Her phone was on the table beside me. I stared at it for a long time, my heart already racing, as if I knew what I was about to do would change something inside me forever. My hand moved slowly, almost against my will. When I picked it up, my fingers trembled. The screen lit up, and there it was again. The Bible app. I hesitated. Every part of my identity screamed at me to stop. This was forbidden. This was dangerous. This was betrayal. But something deeper, something quieter, urged me to continue. I opened it. Words filled the screen, simple yet unfamiliar. My eyes fell on a single line. "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." I froze. Rest. I read it again and again. And the words did not feel like a command. They felt like an invitation. I did not realize how tired I was until that moment. Tired of pretending. Tired of carrying expectations that were never mine. Tired of fearing a God I did not understand. My chest tightened, and I quickly locked the phone, as if someone might see me. Shame flooded my body. What was I doing? I was an imam, a teacher, a guide. And yet here I was, hiding in the darkness, reading words I had spent my life condemning. I placed the phone back on the table, but the words remained in my mind. I could not escape them. The next night, I did it again. And the night after that. Each time, I read a little more. Each time, something inside me shifted. I expected to feel anger. I expected to feel resistance. Instead, I felt something unfamiliar, calm. It frightened me. One night, as I read, I came across another line. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Free. I had never thought of faith in those terms. Faith to me had always been about submission, obedience, fear. But this spoke of freedom. I did not understand it, and yet I could not ignore it. I began to look at Aisha differently. I watched her as she moved through the house, her face no longer burdened by the quiet tension she once carried. There was peace in her now. Real peace. It was not forced. It was not performed. It was real. And for the first time, I wondered if she had found something I had been missing my entire life. That thought terrified me. Because if it was true, it meant everything I believed could be wrong. I sat alone in the darkness that night, the phone in my hand, my heart divided between fear and longing. I realized I was standing on the edge of something I could not yet understand. And part of me was already stepping forward. That night, the dream came with a clarity that left me breathless. I was standing in a vast desert, but it was not the golden sands of Medina I knew. The air was thick, heavy, almost choking. Darkness stretched endlessly in every direction, pressing against me, making each breath feel like fire. I looked down and saw chains wrapped tightly around my body. I tried to move, to lift my arms, but the chains held me fast. Every step I took sank me deeper into the sand, and panic rose like a tidal wave inside me. I could not escape. I screamed, but no sound came out. Then I saw him. At first I thought it was another mirage. A man in white, walking slowly toward me, calm and unwavering. His presence radiated something I had never felt before. Peace. Not the peace of obedience, not the peace of fear, but the kind of peace I had seen in Aisha's eyes and never understood. My chains rattled as he approached. I wanted to beg for mercy, to plead for release, but the words froze in my throat. He stopped a few steps away and looked at me. His eyes were filled with compassion, sorrow, and love, all at once. I wanted to look away, but I could not. He raised his hand, and I felt the chains fall from my body as if they had never been there. My knees buckled. I fell to the ground, tears streaming down my face, and for the first time since Aisha had shown me the Bible, I felt the weight I had carried for decades begin to lift. He knelt beside me and spoke, his voice deep and gentle. I died for you too. The words struck me in a way that no sermon, no lesson, no fear could ever have. I wanted to reach out, to touch him, to ask how this could be, but the desert faded, and I woke up with my pillow soaked in tears. My chest heaved, and I could barely breathe. The room was silent, yet it felt alive with the memory of the dream. I sat up, trembling, unsure if it had been real or a vision, a message from God, or the unraveling of a mind long weighed down by guilt and fear. But deep in my soul, I knew this was not imagination. Something had found me in that darkness I could not escape on my own. That morning, I moved differently. Every step felt heavier with my guilt, yet lighter with something I could not name. I avoided the mosque, avoided the mirrors, avoided anyone who might see the change beginning in me. but I could not avoid him. I saw him in flashes throughout the day, in the sunlight on Aisha's hair, in the rhythm of the prayer beads in my hand, in the silence between breaths. I knew that night had changed me. The chains were gone, but my heart was still tender, still broken, still full of questions. Yet for the first time, I felt something I had never felt before. Hope. A fragile, trembling hope that whispered I might still be able to find peace. That the emptiness I had carried my entire life was not final. That God, or perhaps the one He sent, was calling me into something I could not yet understand, but could not ignore. And in that hope, I began to realize that my journey had only just begun. The dream had broken me, yes, but in that breaking, it had also begun to save me. After that night, nothing could remain hidden, not from myself, and certainly not from the people around me. I tried at first to continue my life as I had known it, to speak the words I had always spoken, to move through the motions of prayer and sermon as if nothing had shifted inside me. But something had changed. I could no longer pretend. The calmness I once demanded from others now felt hollow to me. The verses I recited no longer brought authority or respect. They only echoed the emptiness I had carried for decades. My family began to notice. At first, it was small things. A pause longer than usual in my recitation. A hesitation in my voice when quoting the Quran. The way my eyes lingered on nothing for a fraction too long. Then came the whispers, the questions from my fellow Imams. "Khalid, are you well?" they would ask, smiling politely, but their eyes sharp with suspicion. I wanted to answer them, to lie, to say yes, but the truth was impossible to hide. I began avoiding the mosque, avoiding their eyes, avoiding the conversations that would expose me. But the longer I avoided them, the more the truth clawed its way out. Finally, I could no longer hold it inside. I gathered the courage one evening to confess. I spoke carefully, my voice steady despite the pounding of my heart. "I believe in Jesus," I said. The words felt like fire leaving my lips. The reaction was immediate. Eyes widened, faces hardened, murmurs turned into accusations. They called me a traitor, a disgrace, someone who had betrayed everything we had stood for. My own father, the man who had once placed his hand on my shoulder and declared that Allah had honored me, looked at me with pain and disbelief. "Khalid," he said, shaking his head, "what have you done?" I did not answer. There was nothing to say. I had expected anger, perhaps even threats, but I had not expected the coldness, the distance, the disowning. I had lost my father, my family's trust, my position, my identity. I had lost everything. And yet, strangely, I was not afraid. For the first time in decades, the chains of fear that had defined me fell away. I realized I had found something worth losing everything for. Something far greater than titles, respect, or tradition. My heart, heavy with loss, also carried a strange lightness, a freedom I had never known. For every face turned away from me, for every door closed, I felt the presence of someone else walking beside me, unseen, yet more real than any person I had ever known. My prayers changed too. No longer did I recite out of fear or habit. I spoke from my heart, in whispers at first, then aloud, pleading for guidance, for forgiveness, for understanding. And in those prayers, I felt a strange peace settle over me. It was a peace that mocked the fear I had once carried like armor. Though the world had abandoned me, I was beginning to see that I had not been abandoned at all. Something greater had found me. Something patient. Something loving. Something unshakable. I could not yet name it fully, could not yet understand it entirely, but I knew it was real. And for the first time, I understood that the cost of choosing truth is always high, but the reward is freedom. And freedom, I realized, is priceless. The summons came on a Thursday. A small note slipped under my door by someone I had once called a brother in faith. "You must answer," it read, "or face what is due." My hands shook as I held it. I knew exactly what it meant. My life as I had known it was over. I felt the familiar pull of fear, sharp and immediate. My chest tightened, my throat dry. Every instinct screamed at me to flee, to hide, to deny. But something stronger was rising inside me, a quiet courage I did not recognize. I remembered the man in white, the words of peace, the chains that had fallen. I remembered the Bible's promise. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. I had spent my life living in fear of men, in fear of shame, in fear of judgment. Now, I realized, I had spent my life in the wrong kind of fear. When I arrived, the room was filled with men I had once called brothers. Their faces were sharp, their eyes filled with accusation. "Khalid," one of them said, voice low but full of authority, "you have betrayed us. You have betrayed the faith. You will renounce this heresy, or there will be consequences." My heart pounded, but my voice was calm, steadier than I expected. "I have found peace," I said. "Peace in Jesus." A silence fell over the room, heavier than the weight of any judgment I had ever known. Their anger was immediate. Shouts, accusations, threats. I felt my body tense, ready to defend myself in every way I had been trained to defend honor. But something inside me had changed. The fear that had once ruled me, the fear of shame and punishment, had lost its grip. I could see it now in their eyes, the power they thought they had over me, built entirely on intimidation and fear. But fear had no hold here anymore. I spoke again, slowly, deliberately. "I cannot deny what I have seen. I cannot return to a life built on fear and lies. I have chosen truth, and it has set me free." Their faces darkened, and for a moment I expected violence. I expected exile. I expected worse. But what came was something subtler, more terrifying to them than any physical punishment: my refusal to submit. I left the room without another word. Each step I took echoed louder than any sermon I had ever delivered. For the first time in my life, I walked unafraid. Outside, the air felt different, sharper, and yet lighter. I was no longer their prisoner, not of their judgment, not of their expectations, not even of the fear that had dominated my life for decades. Freedom came at a price. I had lost friends, family, respect, and a place in the community I had once thought was everything. But in that loss, I discovered something more valuable: an unshakable peace, a sense of belonging that could not be taken away. I had stepped into the unknown, into a path filled with uncertainty and risk. But I had also stepped into the truth that I could no longer deny. And as I walked away from the building, I realized that freedom is never given. It is chosen, even when the cost seems unbearable, even when the world condemns you. Truth had found me, and nothing could take it from me now. Alone, stripped of everything I had ever known, I thought I would feel emptiness. I expected despair. I expected regret so heavy it would crush me. But what I found instead was a fragile, quiet hope. At first, it was barely perceptible, like the first light of dawn before the sun rises fully. I spent days wandering my small apartment, staring at the walls, and the silence around me heavier than the weight of my own thoughts. I could no longer pray like I used to. The verses felt like echoes, reminders of a life I could no longer claim. And yet, in the midst of that emptiness, I discovered something unexpected. A space where God, or perhaps Jesus, could speak. I found an online church service one night. The screen glowed in the dark room, faces of people who had been through what I had been through, sharing their stories, praying aloud, singing songs I had never heard. At first, I felt like an intruder, a man who did not belong. But the words seeped into me, and for the first time, I felt a connection that had nothing to do with fear or obligation. I began to whisper prayers in the quiet hours of the night, prayers that were not taught to me, prayers that came from my own brokenness. "I am pleased," I would say. "Help me understand. help me find peace. Sometimes the tears would fall silently, soaking my pillow, and I would feel a release I had never known before. Slowly, over weeks, I discovered a family I never knew existed. Secret believers who reached out with care and understanding, people who had been cast out, threatened, or shamed for their faith, yet who walked boldly because of the love they had received. I began to realize that love without fear was possible. I began to understand that the guilt that had consumed me for years was not absolute. Forgiveness could exist even for someone like me, someone who had once believed that fear and obedience were the only paths to God. I reread the Bible I had first discovered on Aisha's phone. Every verse felt alive now, every word touching parts of me that fear had buried. "Oh, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do," I whispered, realizing that these words applied to me too. The past did not vanish. I could not undo the choices I had made, the mistakes I had lived through. But redemption is not about erasing the past. It is about allowing love to transform it, to make it something that no longer destroys, but something that teaches and frees. I prayed for Aisha, for her peace, for the love she had shown me even in the face of danger. I prayed for myself, for courage, for understanding, for the strength to walk forward without fear. And in the quiet of my apartment, in the stillness of my own heart, I began to feel something I had never thought possible. Hope that was not bound by circumstance, peace that was not dependent on others, love that was not conditional. For the first time in my life, I understood that I was not alone. I was part of something greater, something unshakable, something real. And in that realization, the broken pieces of my soul began to knit themselves together, one whispered prayer at a time, until I began to see that even in the darkest moments, light could find a way in. I am a different man now, though I still carry the scars of the life I once lived. I am not free from pain, and I am not perfect, but I am free from fear. The chains that bound me for 42 years, fear of shame, fear of judgment, fear of losing everything I had been taught to value, have been broken. I tell my story now, not for glory, not for sympathy, but because silence protects darkness. I know what it is like to live in a house full of people and still feel completely alone. To stand before crowds of men who look up to you and realize that inside, your soul is hollow. I know what it is like to lose the people you love most, to be rejected by your family, to be abandoned by the world you once believed could never abandon you. And yet, through it all, I found him. Jesus did not appear to punish me. He did not appear to shame me or condemn me for what I had done or what I had failed to do. He appeared to save me. I remember the first time I prayed with his name on my lips, the words trembling and uncertain, and felt the weight on my chest lift as though it had never been mine to carry. I remember the first tears that fell not in fear or guilt, but in relief, in recognition that I was finally seen, finally loved, finally held by something I had spent a lifetime searching for without knowing it existed. I have lost a wife I loved, a position I respected, a family I depended on. I have lost a home built on tradition, fear, and certainty. And yet, I have gained something infinitely greater: truth, forgiveness, and peace. I live each day now with the knowledge that my life is no longer defined by what others demand, but by what is real, by what is eternal. I walk in freedom, and that freedom is not a luxury. It is a gift I could never have earned, only received. I tell my story because I have seen the cost of fear, the cost of silence, the cost of living without truth. But I also tell it because I have seen the cost of grace, the power of love that refuses to let go, the way redemption can find even the most broken soul. I pray that my words reach someone trapped in darkness, someone afraid of what the world will say, and someone who believes that peace is impossible. I want them to know that even in the deepest shadows, there is light. Even in loss, there is love. Even in death, of the old self, of fear, of chains, there is life. I am Khalid Al-Harbi, once a man defined by fear and obedience, now a man defined by truth and grace. I tell you this so that if my story reaches even one heart, the suffering I endured will not have been meaningless. For every moment I have walked through darkness, every tear I have shed, every silent prayer whispered in despair, Jesus has been there. And if he found me, broken and afraid, he can find you too. My life will never be the same, but for the first time, I know it is truly mine. I have been found, I have been saved, and I am finally free.